A lot has happened in a short period of time since the MEGAFACTORY update. 4 patches in a 5-day span, including 2 hotfixes the day after its release, and a small update/minor change on the 19th. Let's go over the patch notes and break down the fixes, changes, and additions. We briefly touched on the first 2 hotfix patches in my MEGAFACTORY review video, which you can catch up on, and the link in the description, so we'll give this a quick recap. The bunker spawn glitch is fixed. You will no longer get stuck in textures during your bunker expeditions. Thankfully, this was fixed very quickly, as it was one of the most egregious glitches to come from these updates. Radio telescope getting stuck fixed. Not sure what this is about. I haven't come across a radio telescope. This sounds like it would be harder for a player to get stuck in, and also for the dev to figure out that that was a thing, especially in comparison to getting immediately stuck entering the bunker. Regardless, I'm sure we can all agree, fixing bugs that prevent you from moving in the game are good, but playtesting and discovering them before the release are even better. At the very least, both were addressed first, so that's nice. Winter texture glitch fixed, although my bunker basement can still feel the winter effects with the snow, and also the rain. And there are still some texture glitches here and there, including this floor texture seam in the factory. Door gaps fixed, again, another strange one that probably should have been caught early on. Code locks fixed. Again, I don't really play multiplayer, but I can imagine that would be very concerning. But at least it was addressed quickly. Invisible rain bug fixed, although I could swear I still experienced that. And the rest of these are some bug fixes to issues I haven't come across. Clothes and gear desyncs fixed. Invisible HUD bug fixed. Military box spawn exploit fixed. Notice the term exploit there. I don't know what the exploit entailed, but it's good to see that that is fixed. Placement UI elements getting stuck in building mode fixed, and minor fixes and improvements. And later on the same day that Hotfix 2 was released, these hotfixes seem like lower priority cleanup compared to the more important game-breaking glitches and exploits the previous patch addressed, but they're important nonetheless. Deer trophy crafting has been fixed. Mount those heads high and proud. Now you can buy plastic from the resource trader. Again, greatly appreciated. Additional box loot spawning fixed. That's good to know, considering the way the loot has been working lately. I doubt people want to see duplicates of empty boxes. Pooping bug fixed. You can poop again. I'm sure others as well as myself noticed this, but imagine voicing this concern amongst the more important issues. Sewing kit and gun cleaning kit spawns fixed. Previously, these items were missing from the spawn pool. Text plates crafting price reduced, which I can only assume is the sign, and that was much needed considering how ridiculous the price was before, and the fact that I'm going to need quite a bit of them for this warehouse project. And of course, the old minor fixes and improvements, whatever that may entail. Now that we got a quick refresher on the first 2 hotfixes, let's talk about the meat and potatoes hotfix in Factory Hotfix number 3, which was released on the 18th. Now that the required fixes were made in the immediate follow-up to the update, this patch was the opportunity for the dev team to address all the criticism and feedback regarding the new content, changes, and balance issues. Let's take a look at their response. All jackets/uniforms now have some minimum armor, and rig/armor vests provide armor for the whole body except the head. The logic here is that jackets provide inventory space, while vests provide armor as a primary utility. You will also suffer fewer random crits. In the previous update, hits to your legs or arms ignored armor, causing mortal damage. Wearing a jacket now provides some minimum armor, but do not rely solely on it for protection. Wear helmets and vests. Buffing all jackets and uniforms to have some minimum armor definitely makes it easier for some of the newer players, but it's not really a factor for the majority of us who are in the mid to late game, because you likely wouldn't be wearing any jackets or uniforms without armor. The interesting thing here, however, are the rigs and armor vests providing armor for the whole body. I was unaware that hits to your legs or arms actually ignored your armor, and I guess now it's nice to see that the armor and rig will provide armor for your limbs. Upon further inspection on jackets and uniforms, I've noticed that all of them are at the same level of defense, including this military uniform, which claims it protects well from damage. While I don't recall every single defense rating for every jacket/uniform in the game, I find it hard to believe every one I've checked so far was intended to have 3 bars of defense. Coupled with the fact that the exoskeleton at one point also shared this defense rating, spoiler alert, we'll get into that later, I suspect this is yet another glitch associated with the hotfix. I wanted to test this out to see if it was just a visual bug, or they did in fact make every single uniform and jacket 3 defense. and judging by the fact that there is little difference in the damage I'm taking from this Chuverla with and without the military uniform. It appears for a few days now, all of these uniforms and jackets have been nerfed to 3 defense. It seems like this is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, bugs to come from these recent hotfixes, and I'm surprised it's taken this long to address. They fixed the defense on the exoskeleton suit, but if you're not one of the lucky late game players to have one, it appears as if you're going to have to make do with a 3 defense jacket or uniform. Moving on, the artifact selling price has increased. I'm always a big proponent on increasing sell prices. Fortunately, I don't know the original selling prices for the artifacts, but at the very least, this should encourage more people to look for said artifacts, especially with the nerfs to the other money-making methods. I just wish that the junk sell prices would have also increased. Ash efficiency has increased 5 times. What was the logic behind the bread farming economy changes? We noticed that many players found a loophole in the economy by farming and selling bread and then burning cash for ash. That created an infinite money glitch and let people get rich with no risk in the zone. We believe that to have a good life, you have to explore the zone. In the last update, we over-restricted the economy, and now, thanks to your feedback, we're balancing it. We will keep tracking how it works, how survivors farm and scavenge, and make further adjustments. We are also concerned about the possibility of burning cash and may turn it off in a future update. Let us know what you think about this idea. I'm definitely going to do just that. First things first, I think if they wanted to stop the loophole and cycle of infinite money, they could have just disabled the possibility of burning cash like they suggested. That way players are more incentivized to leave their bunker and look for things to burn, and you stop the cycle of farming wheat, making bread, selling bread for cash, burning cash into ash, and using ash to farm more wheat. I think that's a way better solution than nerfing the sell price of bread. I understand not wanting bread making to be the game's best way of making money, but I feel as if breaking that loop of burning cash is more than enough to deter that, and the bread price should be raised a little higher than the 10 rubles it is right now. Also, if you're going to nerf a game's best moneymaker, you should also be prepared to buff the methods you want to be utilized more. By the way, calling this an infinite money glitch doesn't make much sense to me, since it sounds more like an exploit than it is a coding error. This isn't a bug or a glitch that players stumbled upon. It was simply a game mechanic that was overlooked. Regardless, I understand the game design philosophy of wanting your players to not waste all their time in the bunker farming for their money, but actually going out to explore what the game has to offer. And I also appreciate how they admitted they over-restricted the economy and are now making changes to adjust it. Graphs stop regenerating back to their full form. What sounded like a cool idea in practice led to the situation where survivors did not finish these monsters and let them multiply infinitely, creating deadly swarms. This was a threat to the zone. After some manipulations with the ecosystem, they no longer do that. Their hearing radius also got smaller, so you can avoid contact if you are really careful. This mechanic is something I've seen once and assumed it was a glitch. I would have thought with some of their recent patch notes having a bit of lore sprinkled in, that they would have made mention of this mechanic. And it just goes to show that while an idea may seem really cool, it may not be best to implement that in your video game. On the opposite side, Chuverla damage increased. Be really cautious with this monster. I guess I should have been careful what I wished for. This thing certainly puts belt to ass now. Light bulbs are back at the loot spawn. Shout out to yet another item being glitched out of the loot item pool. How this continues to happen is certainly beyond me, but hopefully they can prevent it from happening in the future. Here's one that everyone was asking for, and is certainly long overdue. Loot in the factory biome fixed. The idea in the factory is that there are more containers than in other locations, but not all of them contain loot. UN is stealing stuff from Saslavia and extracting it back to their territory, where they already used some of the gear and consumables they brought with them. However, because of the bug, many containers that were supposed to have loot didn't. This is fixed now. Please let us know how you feel about it. We will keep an eye on the feedback and stats. Again, out of all the prior patch notes that could have used a little lore spicing, this one could have at least provided some context as to why all the loot containers were empty. While I appreciate this attempt at building the lore, if it comes at a cost of a major glitch that essentially removes all the loot from your new biome, maybe it's best you don't get too fancy, especially when the player base is unable to infer or even speculate a lack of loot in those containers were a part of the lore. Tooltips for items have been moved slightly so they don't obstruct your view when aiming, building, placing, and using items. Shout out to the cable guy who was really rooting for this fix. Larry?
Get her done!
I only wish this extended to your weapons magazine size. as it still obstructs some items in the bottom right corner of the storage container. The butcher table is fixed and now has a larger inventory. Some trophy recipes are also fixed. We will add the ability to sell stuffed mutants in the next big update. More things to sell is definitely a plus, but the community and I still feel the storage for the butcher's table is still too small. Take a look at how big these creature parts are, not to mention how many you need to actually craft something, and suddenly this increase in storage capacity still feels really insignificant. I don't think increasing the storage is the best way to go about this. My suggestion is to come up with a system in which creature parts can be stacked only within the butcher table storage, or have the icon of the creature part shrink when placed in the butcher table storage. A sledgehammer is now craftable in the standard workbench again. I really don't know how bugs like this happen so frequently, especially when I don't see much of a correlation between what they changed and the bug itself. As far as I know, they didn't list any changes to the sledgehammer. So what could they have done coding-wise that would have it removed from the crafting table? Here's another fix that addresses the negative feedback from the previous update. Hunting loot chances improved. We do think that it is more interesting when you have a chance in the hunt and not boring guaranteed loot every time. But chances were too unfair before. Now, it is much better. Sometimes you're out of luck, but sometimes you score big time. Wholeheartedly agree here. It's pretty unrealistic to assume for the rest of this game's life cycle, enemy loot drops would always be guaranteed, but to nerf them this drastically, after the player base was accustomed to these guaranteed rates, was a bit of an oversight. Thankfully, they learned from their mistakes with this fix, and I gotta say, it's way more exciting to see what you got after killing a creature. Because, now that the creature drop table isn't limited to the guaranteed drops, you can, for example, have a chance to loot 2 deer skins, instead of just getting the guaranteed one before this change. UN temporarily stopped dropping supplies to the factory zone, so ZAF does not bomb it with grad. We've got information that it will return in the next update with better equipment, possibly UN guns. This lore dump / exposition confuses me a bit. I had to look up what grad meant. Apparently it is a Soviet-designed truck mounted with multiple launch rockets. I can only assume this was supposed to be the original source of ordnance that was supposed to bombard you when you looted a UN crate, but it appears as if they couldn't get it to work, so it will be scrapped until the next update. Here's another one stirring up the community. A landmine spawn fixed. Now they are more visible and not drowned in soil and concrete. Yes, beware. Factory has landmines. Prior to reading this hotfix, I had only experienced one landmine explosion, and that was on the first day of this update. So when I heard a lot of people had problems with quote-unquote invisible landmines, I came to the conclusion that there's only one particular area that concentrated all these landmines. So I took it upon myself to track down the location of all these landmines, and to my surprise, I don't think they fixed this at all. While I can't say I know what they looked like before, as of right now, they are still covered with a lot of this terrain. To say these landmines are not drowned in soil and concrete is simply not true. It's hard for me to gauge just at what extent they want these landmines to be visible. In the bunker, they're not submerged at all, and it's just a straight landmine on the ground. But to implement it in the outdoors, where it can be buried under soil, it makes sense logically speaking, from a real-world perspective. But from a game perspective, if you've already conditioned your player base to be on the lookout for landmines at full size without them being partially submerged, you should make it clear and give some warning that in this update, landmines are going to be trickier to spot. For players experiencing loss of HUD/inventory interface, in the update, we added the possibility to hide the HUD by pressing Grave. We see that many players accidentally press it and lose their HUD, so now, to switch HUD on and off, you'll need to press Alt plus Grave. Or, you could just simply disable it in the settings, and while I do appreciate a shortcut to doing so, adding an extra key kind of defeats the purpose. If you do not see your HUD, try reactivating it with this hotkey or in the in-game's option menu. And last but certainly not least in this hotfix, the first round of optimization is here. We switched to DX12 and significantly improved UE navigation tech, which previously caused major lag in some locations. We also improved LODs for about 30% of assets. In some cases or areas, this increased FPS by up to 200%. We will continue our work on this and will issue further updates to improve performance. If you notice any artifacts or problems with the NPC navigation, please let us know. I will let you know that I was excited when I read this patch note, and when I booted up the game, unfortunately, couldn't notice much of an FPS difference. I tried changing so many graphical settings, and I still couldn't notice a substantial increase in FPS. It might help if I knew what was causing these dips. Does my bunker have too many loose items on the ground? Do I have too many items stored? Did I decorate this bunker more than what the game could handle? Do I have too many lighting fixtures? Is the size of my save file too large? Until I know for sure what's causing these FPS drops on my end, I can only sit here and wait for the developers to come up with a solution. One thing's for certain, it ain't this computer's fault. And now for the fourth and final patch since the MEGAFACTOry update. This one includes minor changes and bug fixes. More loot in UN and military crates in the factory biome. I think before this patch, the military crates were still empty, and some of the other storage boxes actually had loot in them. With this patch, I believe now all of the crates have a chance of having something inside them. But in my opinion, I still feel like I'm missing a lot of items. I think the only real unique item I looted since these hotfixes has been the UN hazmat suit. So I still feel as if I'm missing out on these 50 new items, especially the ones exclusive to this factory biome. Another increase in inventory space and the butcher workbench. You've already heard my thoughts on that. I think there are better ways of going about it than just increasing the space. Advanced splitter and combiner recipes fixed. I don't know if this refers to them being missing completely from the workbench, but at the very least it seems like the resources needed for the recipes have been lowered. And to end the last patch note with a bang, the exoskeleton armor has been fixed. I guess they didn't make any mention of its nerf, but they will mention the fact that they have fixed it from being a 3 defense armor. People are understandably upset about the nerf, but I'm more upset about the context surrounding it. I understand that with the addition of new content, in this case the armor, that previous best in slot gear are going to be outclassed. What I don't understand is why you nerfed the previously best in slot armor that was found in the last biome in terms of shining progression, so much so that it could get outclassed by an armor found in an earlier shining biome. At least have the courtesy to change the flavor text, mentioning it being the strongest armor in the world. If you add loot that is better / comparable to loot in the end of the game, before the actual end of the game, what motivation is there to seek out that loot? After experiencing all the factory biome has to offer, can you honestly say now that you'll be just as excited to hunt down the broken military uniform, knowing that the exoskeleton was so much better? I'm just saying, this exoskeleton nerf would make a lot more sense in terms of progression if the factory was the last late game biome. As it stands, it already outclasses the bunker in terms of scale of map, exploration, enemies, difficulty, and now loot / gear. In summary, I'd say with all these hotfixes, it's 1 step forward and 2 steps back. It seems with every fix or change, 2 or 3 more bugs, problems, balancing issues arise. Think about all the hotfix patches, every single change made in the last 4 days since the update. If you think that's a lot to take in as a player, it's just as much as a handful for someone trying to make sense of all this and provide a concise video explaining all these changes. I have to reiterate that it would have been a lot easier for the dev team, the player base, and the people making content about this game if this major update was playtested before its release. I am available for playtesting. That way, you wouldn't need to fire off so many hotfixes in such little time in an attempt to play catch-up, because in doing so, more problems have been created. I am not a developer, so I don't have a grasp on how difficult that is to code and implement changes to your game, but I am a video game enthusiast, so I do know that playtesting your updates and releasing them with less bugs / issues than actual content is extremely beneficial for your game and the goodwill of your community. I hear a lot of feedback from you guys regarding new and cool ideas to implement in future updates, but if every update causes more issues than they solve, I'd much rather wait until the dev team is able to get things under control and fine-tune everything else before new content is added. So now that it appears the factory biome has finally been restored to the state it was intended to at launch, I'll give my final thoughts on it. It's by far the best and most fleshed out biome content-wise, so much so it puts the other biomes to shame, and I hope the dev team will shift focus on improving the biomes they already have instead of adding a new one in the near future. I was really impressed at not just the amount of areas you could explore, but the amount of fun I had exploring them. I've played this update for over 12 hours, and still feel as if I've only scratched the surface of seeing all the sights it has to offer. The enemies and loot rewards, however, still make it feel like more of a chore to explore. As a solo player, I easily chewed through hundreds of bullets fighting off a multitude of zombies and grafts, and I always return home with no ammo left. I still feel as if it's a bit barren in terms of the more sought after items, like the exclusive gear. I fear once the veneer of the new content wears off, players will quickly realize, between the ammo sink, the underwhelming looting experience, and difficulty of the factory, it's just not worth visiting beyond marveling its map design. I'd just like to take this time to thank you guys for the feedback and support that MEGAFACTORY review video got. I wasn't planning on releasing another patch review video this quick, but as the days rolled by and more hotfixes got released, I figured there was enough meat on the bone and need for a video to concisely package the aftermath. I love this game, and certainly plan on making more content about it in the future. Even though I know this game and its community is small in comparison to a lot of similar scale games out there, I'm still surprised how little informative YouTube content there is about it. And while I am new to the world of streaming and content creation, I'm going to strive to become someone worth watching for misery content. That's all I have to say about the hotfix aftermath for now. There are definitely a lot more, less serious issues I've come across, but in an effort to keep this video as concise as possible, I figured they weren't worth mentioning here. If you are interested in hearing my takes on those issues, I suggest you watch these two Vods of when I played this game right after the hotfixes. And if you like watching me play and discuss Misery, or are interested in watching me play some other cool indie and retro games, you can subscribe to me on YouTube and follow me on twitch.tv/JohnnyFuego. I usually stream twice daily at around 11 a.m. and 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thanks for watching. If you want to see me play more video games, subscribe to me on YouTube and follow me on Twitch.